Today's writing question is, in many countries, people are leading increasingly sedentary lives, with physical inactivity becoming a widespread concern. What are the main causes and consequences of this trend? What measures should individuals and governments take to reverse it? This is a causes, consequences, and solutions question, and it is one of the most common question types in the IELTS writing test. A weak answer lists points without developing them. A Band 9 answer builds a chain of reasoning in which each idea follows logically from the one before it. That is exactly what you are about to hear. If you are new here, subscribe now. This channel will help you improve your IELTS band score. Here is the Band 9 model essay. Physical inactivity has become one of the defining public health challenges of the 21st century, and it is a problem that is structural rather than personal in origin. The shift toward desk-based employment, the design of car-dependent cities, and the rise of passive digital entertainment have collectively engineered movement out of daily life. Unless both individuals and governments act in a deliberate and coordinated way, this trend will continue to deepen with serious consequences for population health and public expenditure. The primary driver of sedentary behavior is the wholesale restructuring of work. As service industries and digital platforms have displaced physically demanding labor, the average worker now spends the bulk of the day seated before a screen, a posture that the body was not designed to sustain for hours at a time. This occupational shift is reinforced by the built environment, cities planned around car use in which walkable public spaces are scarce, and home delivery services eliminate even the brief physical effort of shopping, leave residents with diminishing opportunities for incidental movement. The consequences extend well beyond weight gain. Sustained physical inactivity triggers a cascade of metabolic and cardiovascular impairments, weakening the body's capacity for basic self-regulation and placing escalating pressure on health systems that are already overstretched. Addressing this requires action at both the individual and the governmental level, since each alone is insufficient. The most effective personal strategy is not a dramatic lifestyle overhaul, which most people abandon within weeks, but the systematic embedding of movement into existing routines. Taking stairs rather than lifts, cycling to work, or scheduling brief exercise breaks during the workday. Governments, however, bear the greater structural responsibility. Investing in cycling infrastructure and mandating walkable neighborhood design through urban planning law can make active choices the default rather than the exception. Where economic barriers restrict access to sport and fitness, publicly funded community programs can extend participation across income groups, ensuring that an active life is not a privilege available only to those who can afford it. In my view, the core problem is that modern life has made inactivity the path of least resistance, and no individual willpower can fully overcome a structurally sedentary environment. Meaningful change requires governments to redesign the physical and economic conditions in which people live, treating activity not as a personal lifestyle preference, but as a public health infrastructure priority. Physical inactivity will not be reversed through awareness campaigns alone. It demands the kind of systemic redesign that makes movement the easiest, cheapest, and most natural option available to everyone, regardless of income, age, or motivation. That is the full Band 9 essay. Now let us break it down paragraph by paragraph so you understand exactly why every decision was made. The introduction. The introduction does 3 things in 3 sentences, and every word earns its place. The first sentence establishes the topic and immediately commits to a position. This is a structural problem, not a personal one. That distinction is the thesis of the entire essay. Notice that the writer does not say physical inactivity is bad and has many causes. That kind of vague opening scores in the Band 6 range. The Band 9 writer tells you immediately what kind of problem this is. The second sentence names 3 specific structural causes: the shift to desk-based employment, car-dependent city design, and passive digital entertainment. These are not random examples, they represent three distinct domains: work, environment, and leisure, and they prepare the reader for the argument that follows in the body. The third sentence is where many students miss points. It is a conditional sentence. Unless both individuals and governments act in a deliberate and coordinated way, this trend will continue to deepen. This tells the examiner that the writer understands the relationship between the problem and its solution, and it previews the essay's two-level approach to solutions, individual action, and government action, without simply listing topics the way a weak introduction does. Body paragraph 1, causes and consequences. This paragraph handles two of the three questions in the task, causes and consequences, inside a single, tightly unified paragraph. That is an advanced structural choice, and it works because the paragraph maintains a single causal thread throughout. The paragraph opens with the topic sentence: "The primary driver of sedentary behavior is the wholesale restructuring of work." The word primary signals that the writer is making a judgment, not just listing. This immediately demonstrates analytical thinking. The next sentence explains the mechanism. It does not simply say, "People sit more because of desk jobs." It explains why. As service industries have displaced physically demanding labor, the average worker now spends the bulk of the day in a posture that the body was not designed to sustain. That phrase, "a posture that the body was not designed to sustain," is the kind of precise causal language that separates a Band 7 response from a Band 9-1. The paragraph then widens the lens to the built environment, noting that car-dependent cities reinforce the same inactivity that desk-based work creates. The two causes are shown to compound each other, not simply exist alongside each other. That is sophisticated academic reasoning. The consequences section follows naturally from this analysis. The writer avoids the common mistake of listing health problems. Instead, the essay frames the consequence in terms of mechanism. Sustained inactivity triggers a cascade of metabolic and cardiovascular impairments. The word cascade tells you that these are not isolated outcomes but linked progressive deterioration. The paragraph closes by connecting individual health consequences to the system-level consequence pressure on overstretched health systems. That connection between individual and systemic consequence is a hallmark of Band 9 task achievement. If this is already clearer than what you have been writing, hit the like button. It helps me grow the channel and produce better videos for you. Body paragraph 2, solutions. This paragraph follows a parallel structure: individual solutions first, then government solutions. But notice that the paragraph does not treat them as equally weighted. The essay explicitly states that governments bear the greater structural responsibility. That is a considered judgment, not a neutral list, and it connects directly to the thesis established in the introduction that this is a structural problem requiring structural solutions. The individual solution section is also notable for what it rejects. The essay says, "The most effective personal strategy is not a dramatic lifestyle overhaul which most people abandon within weeks, but the systematic embedding of movement into existing routines." By naming and dismissing the obvious weak solution before presenting the stronger one, the writer demonstrates the kind of critical, evaluative thinking that characterizes Band 9 task achievement. The government solutions are presented with institutional specificity, cycling infrastructure, urban planning law, publicly funded community programs. These are not vague suggestions. Each one targets a specific barrier to physical activity, infrastructure, planning regulation, and economic access. The paragraph closes with a phrase that encapsulates the essay's core argument, ensuring that an active life is not a privilege available only to those who can afford it. This is not decoration. It reframes the entire solution section as a matter of equity, which adds a dimension of moral reasoning to what might otherwise be a merely practical discussion. The opinion paragraph. Many IELTS candidates skip a dedicated opinion paragraph in a causes and solutions essay. This essay includes one, and it earns marks by doing something specific. It escalates the argument rather than repeating it. The introduction said the problem is structural. The opinion paragraph explains why that matters. No individual willpower can fully overcome a structurally sedentary environment. This is a stronger, more direct claim than anything in the introduction, and it justifies the heavier weight given to government action in the solutions paragraph. The paragraph then restates the core demand on governments in precise terms, redesigning the physical and economic conditions in which people live and treating activity as a public health infrastructure priority. The phrase infrastructure priority is deliberately chosen. Infrastructure is something governments routinely fund and plan for. By framing activity in these terms, the writer makes the policy recommendation feel concrete and achievable, not idealistic. The conclusion. The conclusion commits to the essay's position without softening it. Physical inactivity will not be reversed through awareness campaigns alone. This is a direct, confident statement that rejects the most common ineffective response to the problem, which is public information campaigns. The final sentence delivers the essay's central argument in its most compressed form. The goal is to make movement the easiest, cheapest, and most natural option available to everyone regardless of income, age, or motivation. The phrase regardless of income, age, or motivation is important because it makes the solution universal. This is not a conclusion that opens new topics or weakens the position. It crystallizes and closes. The conclusion also avoids a common Band 6 mistake. It does not begin with, "In conclusion, this essay has discussed." It states a position and stops. That is the correct way to end a Band 9 essay. Vocabulary. Let us now look at 6 words and phrases from this essay that demonstrate strong lexical resource and, more importantly, why each one was chosen over a simpler alternative. The first is engineered movement out of daily life. The verb engineered is exact in a way that removed or reduced is not. It implies deliberate design, which directly supports the essay's argument that inactivity is a structural outcome, not a random one. The second is incidental movement, and this phrase refers to the physical activity that happens naturally as a byproduct of daily life, walking to a bus stop, carrying shopping, climbing stairs. It is more precise than everyday exercise because it captures movement that is not consciously intended. Using this phrase shows that the writer has thought carefully about what kind of movement is actually being lost. The third is triggers a cascade of metabolic and cardiovascular impairments. The noun cascade conveys not just multiple consequences but linked sequential deterioration. A list of health problems and a range of negative effects are vague by comparison. Cascade is specific about the relationship between the consequences. Each one leads to the next. The fourth is the systematic embedding of movement into existing routines. The word embedding is precise here because it implies integration rather than addition. You do not add something external to your day. You build it in structurally. This vocabulary choice mirrors the essay's broader argument about structural rather than personal solutions. The fifth is the path of least resistance. This is an idiom drawn from physics and engineering that describes the route a force naturally takes when given options. Using it here says something precise. Inactivity is not chosen deliberately. It is what happens when the environment makes it the easiest option. This is idiom used for exact meaning, not for decoration. The sixth is public health infrastructure priority. The collocation of infrastructure with public health is unusual but purposeful. Infrastructure carries the connotation of something permanent, funded, and planned by governments at a systemic level. By using this term, the writer elevates the argument from governments should do more to governments should treat activity the way they treat roads and water supply, which is a far more specific and powerful claim. Grammar. Now, let us look at 5 grammatical structures used in this essay. For each one, I will give you the exact sentence or clause from the essay that demonstrates it. The first structure is the unless conditional, which is a variation of the if conditional used to express a negative condition. The essay uses it in the introduction. Unless both individuals and governments act in a deliberate and coordinated way, this trend will continue to deepen with serious consequences for population health and public expenditure. The structure is unless plus present simple, comma, future simple. Using unless rather than if not is a higher registered choice and makes the sentence more forceful. The second structure is the fronted adverbial clause. This is where a subordinate clause of time, reason, or condition is placed at the beginning of the sentence rather than at the end. The essay uses it at the start of the second body paragraph. As service industries and digital platforms have displaced physically demanding labor, the average worker now spends the bulk of the day seated before a screen. Diffronting the adverbial signals to the reader that the background condition is being established before the main claim is made. This is a sophisticated cohesion technique. The third structure is the non-defining relative clause using in which. The essay writes, cities planned around car use in which walkable public spaces are scarce and home delivery services eliminate even the brief physical effort of shopping, leave residents with diminishing opportunities for incidental movement. The clause, in which walkable public spaces are scarce, gives additional information about the cities and is set off by commas. Notice how much information is packed into the single sentence without losing grammatical control. That density of information within correct grammar is a marker of band 9 grammatical range. The fourth structure is the passive construction. The essay uses it in the clause, a posture that the body was not designed to sustain for hours at a time. The passive is the correct choice here because the agent, evolution, nature, or millions of years of human biology is less important than the fact itself. The body simply was not built for sustained sitting. Using the passive focuses the reader on the outcome, not the cause. The fifth structure is the gerund phrase used as a grammatical subject. The essay opens the government solutions section with investing in cycling infrastructure and mandating walkable neighborhood design through urban planning law can make active choices the default rather than the exception. The subject of this sentence is not a single noun but a compound gerund phrase, investing and mandating, used together. This is a complex nominal structure that allows the writer to name 2 policy actions in a single controlled sentence without using a list. What makes this essay band 9? Let us close with a clear summary of what collectively earns this essay a band 9 score across all 4 criteria. On task achievement, the essay does not simply address all 3 questions in the task. It builds a single, coherent argument across all of them. The causes, consequences, and solutions are not presented as separate sections with no connection. The causes explain why the consequences are systemic. The solutions are designed to address the structural nature of those causes, and the opinion paragraph escalates the argument rather than restating it. Every paragraph extends and deepens a central thesis. On coherence and cohesion, each paragraph develops one clear idea, and each sentence extends the logic of the previous one. The transition from individual solutions to government solutions is marked by a concessive structure. Governments, however, bear the greater structural responsibility, which signals the shift while maintaining the paragraph's unity. The conclusion closes the argument rather than opening new ones. On Lexical Resource, the vocabulary is chosen for precision and analytical purpose, like words like cascade, embedding, and engineered do work that simpler words cannot do. The essay avoids the common mistake of using advanced vocabulary decoratively. Every high register word earns its place by expressing something that a simpler word would not. On grammatical range and accuracy, the essay uses a genuine variety of structures: conditionals, fronted adverbials, relative clauses with in which passive constructions, and gerund phrases as subjects. None of these structures feel forced or out of place. They're used because they are the most natural and accurate way to express the ideas the writer wants to express. That is the standard. Study the reasoning, not just the language. I will see you in the next video.